You are welcome to Circle of Wine Writers Diversity and Inclusion seminar, Diversity and Inclusion in the Wine Industry. I'm Sumi Sarma. I'm the treasurer of this Circle of Wine Writers. The subject is very topical and increasingly becoming important given the number of diverse people that are working in the industry today. People such as myself, I'm from India. I've been working in the UK for the last 8 years, and many more like myself with diverse backgrounds, different cultures, different sexual orientations. All of us have faced numerous challenges looking for answers, for equality, for being treated with respect. And to deal and discuss with all these issues, we have a special guest with us, diversity and inclusion consultant, Kirsten MacLeod, who will explore why the industry has been so slow on the uptake, what steps are being taken, what more can be done by everyone to push things forward. To give you a quick brief, Kirsten has spent the last 8 years helping organizations improve their diversity and inclusion. 8 years ago, not many cared, but today in the corporate world, it is on every board's agenda. It is multi-stranded. It's more than just hiring women, Black, Asian, disabled, LGBT, but it's also about how to retain them, how to create an inclusive environment for all to thrive and shine. Kirsten is a WSET diploma student, and last year she wrote and engaged with CEOs of a number of influential organizations, calling them to work together and take action on this topic. This is now happening and should provide momentum for real big change in the sector. Thank you, Kirsten, for joining us. Welcome, and over to you.
Oh, Kirsten's.
I'm on mute, right, I'm fine. Thank you very much. Diversity and inclusion has been on my mind for a number of years as I've been helping organisations, as Sumi quite rightly pointed out, move the dial forward on their diversity and inclusion. And she's absolutely right. You know, even 5 years ago, people didn't really care, but that has been changing. There's been huge pressure from shareholders with large corporates to actually make change and create much more diverse boards. It's gone as far as regulators actually claiming that the last financial crash was down to organisations having too many white men on their boards and not enough diversity of thought and thinking, and creating that groupthink that actually enables everybody to just think it's all okay without anybody questioning deeply enough. So the last 10 years has been really interesting, and I think it's fair to say that the wine trade and wine industry, it was really highlighted to them last summer with Black Lives Matter. I'll talk about the industry in two different parts, because I think it would be unfair for me to tarnish Pernod Ricard and the Diageos of this world in the same way as some of the smaller wine organisations. As again, under shareholder pressure, your Diageos and your Pernod Ricards have got pretty well-oiled diversity and inclusion machines. So they've got great policies, they've got great hiring strategies, they have great supplier management, and actually it's that same shareholder pressure that some of the larger other FTSE 100 companies and FTSE 250s have bowed down to and had to actually take action on. So when I talk about the wine industry, I exclude those large corporates, and in that I'd include people like Accolade and Treasury Wines. But the more small and medium wine organisations, I think it was really highlighted to them with Black Lives Matter that actually change was coming. People reacted quite differently. I think people who were already in the mindset of where there had been discrimination or where there were opportunities that they just weren't able to access, that was a huge opportunity for them to feel that they could speak out more and talk further about this. And of course, as there is today, there were a number of people who chose to continue to ignore it. And that will happen. I put some of that down to being generational, but not completely. And as I talk about to lots of people, it's a much harder battle to try and change the minds of people who aren't open for change than actually help people along a journey who do want to make change. So I focus my efforts with those who actually who want to engage and who want to make the world a better place through creating more diversity and inclusion. I put together a short presentation. It's not really a presentation. It's a couple of slides to talk about things that I'd like to cover today, which I think Andrea can just pop up. If we just go on to the second slide. Okay. So these are the topics I'd just like to cover off today. And some of them are really looking at where I think the UK wine industry is today. Some of it is how can the wine industry change and what needs to do. It's a really big question, who is responsible for making this change? The obvious answer is everybody, but it's actually what role can people play to make that happen? And then I've looked at a couple of the areas that I think individuals can really make a difference to improving the situation with D&I. This is not something that sits purely at the feet of large corporates. It's something that every single person who has an interest and is committed to improving D&I can play a role. So that's sort of my starting point. Okay. Andrea, you can keep that up if you like, or you can take it down, I don't mind. So for me, diversity covers the protected characteristics under the Equality Act, and the ones that are talked about most are gender, race, disability, sexual orientation, and one that isn't covered under the Equality Act that I feel is really important is socioeconomic backgrounds. With diversity, you can see by looking around the industry that there is a dominance of white men, and that there is a real lack of diversity in senior positions, which has an impact on how we make things change. Diversity is very hard to change from the bottom up. It needs to be the chief execs, the owners, the board members, the senior leadership team who are fully committed to actually making the changes required to increase diversity within an organisation. Without that, it becomes window dressing and becomes tokenism, where somebody who is of a underrepresented, from an underrepresented community is employed, brought into an organisation, and history will show that quite often that person will not last longer for much more than 12 months, and often won't even last 12 months because they're being brought into an organisation where nothing changes. Nothing changes other than they've hired somebody who looks a bit different or has come from a different background. And that's where the inclusion part of diversity and inclusion is so important. And the more advanced organisations right now actually don't really talk about diversity. They talk about inclusion and culture and equality. And that's really been that move forward from the initial starting point of let's look at financial services as an example, where there was a demand for 50% of board members to be made up of women, and working towards all leadership teams, and working towards a quota or a target, which is quite controversial, but in some instances has been very impactful. I have mixed views on it, but that's not one for now. Within the wine industry, there needs to be much more driven from the chief execs to look at not just what their people makeup looks like, but actually what is it like for somebody who's come from a diverse background to come inside and work within the organisation. And that's a big task because it requires education and training and a huge investment to make an environment inclusive where people coming in feel that their voices can be heard and they have a voice and that they are comfortable. So as you can imagine, even consider that as a company the size of 10, and you hire a Black person as your marketing manager. And the company have never hired anybody who is not white, and the senior team within that organisation don't really know any people that aren't white like them, because actually they coexist in a world that's very comfortable of their white middle class community. And it's very easy for situations like that for the new person who's joining to be offended, not felt welcome, without actually anybody in the organisation realising that that is the case. So on one of my topics for discussion is education, and I think I've sort of touched on that slightly now from where we are. Okay, let me just give you some statistics to help understand where the world is at in the UK. In the UK, the BAME community, and these are from the government statistics, account for 14.5% of the UK population. 40% of those people are based in London, which is no surprise. And actually, if you work in London and you commute around on the tube, the world looks like quite a diverse place. But London is a little microcosm with huge diversity, but that's not represented in lots of other parts of the UK. The estimate is that 20% of people of working age have some form of disability. A lot harder to understand where disability may lie. It's not, it's very visible if somebody is, to see someone's gender. It's visible to see if somebody isn't white. It's a lot harder to see if someone is disabled. And that, to understand that, you need to create environments where people are confident to share their data and actually about them. That's not always easy. The FTSE 100 has 5% of its CEOs are women, 17% of its CFOs are women. However, there is not one non-white CEO, CFO, or chair within the FTSE 100 today. And disappointingly, that has gone backwards in the last 6 years. So in 2014, those numbers were actually higher. So it's not just the wine trade that suffers from this issue, but it's a much broader problem. And even with huge amounts of investment from companies in the FTSE 100, they're still struggling to get it right. If I look at the wine industry, there's one female CFO. There are 2 female CFOs. Again, I'm not talking about the big, large corporates. And there's one male Asian CFO. So fairly low representation at the top level. And I looked at a blend of retailers, wholesalers, importers, producers, to get a feel for what organizations were doing. And they were from companies that were 10 people up to companies that had 150 people. So quite diverse. Looking outside the UK, Fiona Beckett published a piece last year which talked about there being approximately 60 Black-owned wineries in the US and a similar number in South Africa. In the UK, looking at producers, Oostbroek is run by American brewer and her husband, and she identifies as Brazilian Black. And Folk is a rosé producer where one half of the couple is an Asian lady. And that's a total representation of producers in the UK. Does that surprise anybody? I appreciate it's not really Q&A, but does that surprise people?
No, not massively at all.
Yeah.
Knowing who's there, no.
It's hard. It's really hard. And I think, and I just want to say at the outset, you know, and I think the FTSE 100 without any representation of BAME people in their top roles just shows how hard this is and how long it takes to actually make change. So there's a huge desire at the moment for change to happen, and it is happening, and it's step by step, and you may not always see it, but it just takes a very, very long time. Okay. So if I look at why does it exist like this? Why does the UK industry look like this? I'm going to align this a little bit to the insurance industry, which is not always very popular, because wine people with the last industry you probably want to be compared with is the insurance industry, but there are some similarities as to the history of how we got here today. So I look at smaller organisations in the wine industry, and the barriers for entry are relatively low. So if you've been working for an organisation who has, where you've built good relationships up, there are a lot of examples where people go out on their own and they grow and they expand, and maybe they started off as 1 or 2 people, but actually suddenly become 40 people. And they've created businesses that are comfortable. They were probably made up originally of lots of people that they knew from their own networks, where their success is created on the success they know from the people who've joined them. And the insurance industry is very similar, where the barriers for entry in the past had been low, and people were able to come out as brokers and set up on their own. And where that's become slightly problematic is when you're a small company of 5 friends, that's probably less of an issue because you're working hard and you're growing your business. But when you start to become a business the size of 40 or 50 or 60 people, you start to become an organisation that can no longer just keep hiring their friends. And that's where, but actually you may not want to change because it's very comfortable where you are. You're surrounded by people who look like you. You're surrounded by people who think like you. You're back in this group think situation. And maybe it's a little bit uncomfortable to hire somebody who isn't like you. And I would say there is an element of that that explains one of the reasons why the UK industry is like it is today. It's not intentional. Nobody's set out to say, I only want to create an industry or a company where I'm full of people that look like me, but by default, people end up there. So what it requires to make that change is a recognition that there is a need for change or a desire to want to make change, because actually, if we know that organisations that are more diverse are more successful. There've been a number of studies around that, more commercially successful. We know that people are attracted to businesses if they look inside and feel that there are people in there that look like them. If somebody looks at your organisation and sees that you are all white and you are not of that background, it looks less attractive. So there's a huge space there for a need to change, but it has to come again, as I've talked earlier, from the top, and the mindset has to be, we see the benefits of doing this, we're doing it for the right reasons, we're doing it for equality, but most organisations will also need to be doing it for good commercial reasons, and there are plenty of them to support that. Okay. Looking at whose responsibility this is. So I've talked about the responsibility of the chief execs and the board and why that's important. But actually the responsibility lies with every single person. The chief execs and the board members have the power, and I'll come on and talk about becoming allies and the importance of white male allies in a moment. But every person in an organisation has a chance, or on their own as a freelancer, has a chance to have an impact, and that can't be underestimated. I'll talk about how people can do that individually. Okay. So what is being done and what more can be done? So I'm going to start with collaboration. There's lots being done at the moment, but let's start with collaboration. Groups coming together in communities to share, support and maximise resources. So there are a couple of good examples in the US that I'll just touch on. So Wine Unify, which has been set up to elevate and amplify opportunities for underrepresented groups and amplify voices of people of colour who are already doing well. Tahara Habib Sahu Society, creating community hubs, again, increasing economic inclusion and empowerment to people of colour. This also includes education and scholarships and bursaries for people who don't have the means to elevate themselves. Both interesting organisations, I'm sure you've seen them, and they just continue to go from strength to strength. In the UK, it was a very disjointed, or in fact completely non-connected group. And Black Lives Matter really motivated me to call out for people to do something about it. So as Sumi said, I wrote to a number of wine influencers, and I don't mean that in the Instagram style, but educators, trade bodies, writers, saying, I've been looking at the industry for a long time. It's very white, it's very male, Black Lives Matter, you have to listen. What are you all doing about it? And I got some good responses back. And then I spoke to them all individually, and everybody kept saying to me, oh, we really should work together. It's a really big topic. There's an opportunity for us to share more. And nothing really happened. And everybody said, oh yeah, we know each other. It's okay, we can connect. And then when Wine Bitch came along, I was equally as incensed, and I wrote to everybody again and just said, come on, enough is enough. You have to do something about this. You can't just keep saying, yes, we need to collaborate. Yes, we need to work together. Actually, you really need to take action. So last Thursday, the Drinks Trust brought together 33 people across 21 different parts of the drinks industry to talk about collaboration and working together on diversity and inclusion, which I have to say was absolutely momentous. Ross Carter very kindly just took on the mantle of actually organising this because, again, it's a tough thing to do and it's huge. So what the Drinks Trust are doing are looking at how they can create some frameworks, some guidelines, a code of conduct, a charter, something that enables people across the drinks industry to make some commitments to improving diversity and inclusion themselves, either as individuals if you're a freelancer, or as an organisation or a charity or a trade body, and more than just putting a diversity and inclusion policy in place, but actually starting to bring diversity and inclusion to life within their own organisation. And it's a long road to travel. So it is very, very early days. But that will also incorporate training, which I think is essential, some free resources for people to access, but also a huge network of people that are all at different stages of their diversity and inclusion journey, where there's an opportunity to collaborate instead of reinventing the wheel all the time. And that's something that often happens with diversity and inclusion. You get lots of pockets of people doing things, whereas a lot of the things people will look at, although there will be nuances attached to their particular part of the industry, there are huge similarities. So that's an enormous piece of work, and Lucy Markson and Ross Carter really need to be applauded for taking that on. It's a long, hard journey, and it'll need a lot of time and commitment from lots of people. Education. I'm going to split education down into two pieces here. So there are a number of bursaries and scholarships becoming available for underrepresented people. WSET have a number. There was the Louis Roderer writers one, Majestic with their 24 trainees to do WSET, and there are certainly more to come from the Drinks Trust and a number of other organisations. So this opportunity for learning is invaluable for people who may well be in the industry right now, but who can't see how they're going to move forward or don't have the ability to do so, and also for people entering into the industry. One of the things that, and I'm speaking to both WSET and IMW, is how do you also create a pipeline of people to keep going through education right through to becoming Master of Wine, where there are it's a very, very small number of people that come from anything other than that come from a different background. And I think there's a big piece there again around the socioeconomic piece. But I also talk about education within organizations. So I touched on it with inclusion. So if you are to create an inclusive business, you need to help the people who already work for you understand, firstly, what diversity and inclusion is, what it means to create an inclusive organization, what kind of biases do people currently have, how can they be made aware of their biases, are they happy to address their biases. It requires personal education, and I think that's something that everybody can take on. So that could be attending some training courses, it could be reading books, it could even be going back to the webinars that really, I think, kicked things off significantly last June with the Unheard Voices in Wine, which was the first webinar to be hosted, I mean, there were 2 of them, hosted by a purely Black panel of people in the wine industry. If you haven't listened to it, I would highly recommend it. I mean, it's really eye-opening and so authentic. So education, I think, sits with everybody, and that will help people become better aware of what's going on. And that gives people an opportunity to learn about things like microaggressions, the use of language, which is obviously critical to the group of people I'm talking to here. Becoming an ally, I think, is really a really important piece that is often just not considered enough. So here I am as a white, relatively privileged woman talking to a group of you about diversity, and you would be quite right to say, well, Kirsten, what right do you have? But I am an ally to people who are underrepresented, and that's about supporting groups other than other white people like me, and it may be around race or gender or sexual orientation or faith. It's about being an ally is about listening more and trying to understand how and why people feel excluded. And I don't think as a general rule we do enough listening. And maybe that's a question to everybody here. Have you had a conversation with somebody like that who may in the past or currently be feeling excluded? Gender, to find allies on gender diversity is a lot easier. I mean, it helps that 50% of the population are women, and therefore there is greater access to women who maybe have been struggling day to day with discrimination. It's a lot harder and it's been less easy for people to understand some of the same emotional and psychological impacts that other underrepresented people can face. And by that, I'm talking around colour, disability, sexual orientation, and that may well be the impacts they have in the workplace, but also in their everyday life. Now, being kind, some of this will come down to people using the wrong language or offending, and that is a big consideration. And even recently, I've been talking to people about actually, can I use this type of language when I'm talking about people? There's lots of stuff online about it. You know, if you're not sure, just type it into Google. Try and overcome your fear. Back on my socioeconomic bandwagon, which is definitely one of my big things, people are discriminated on because of their accents. And it's not just accents from different countries, it's accents from different parts of the UK or different countries, because maybe they don't like people who've come from that area. And again, if we're coming back to that smaller group of people who like working with people that are like themselves, then that's hard. So for me, one of the things I've found, just I'll go off on a slight tangent here, but with hiring individuals in a COVID environment, where lots of people have still changed jobs over the last year, but they've changed jobs over the power of Zoom or Teams. And that can't change the accent you see in somebody. But what it can do, and where I think it's reduced some discrimination, is the person who maybe has that slightly limp handshake that somebody might reject somebody on, or the person who doesn't walk in standing proud because that's just the way they are, or the fact that somebody can't afford to buy their expensive designer suit, but actually turns up to an interview in their Marks and Spencer suit. So there are so many ways that that discrimination comes into play around things like socioeconomic backgrounds and accents, but it's talking to people and actually being an ally to them and understanding why are these things happening, and therefore what can I do to help? How can I help call it out? How can I help stand up for these people? What can I do? What can I do as an individual to help move that forward? And then, of course, finally, to a group of writers, the power of the pen, one of the big ways of actually elevating the D&I problem is through writing. Now, there's a huge responsibility for organisations to be able to take control of this, but I talk about this a lot, which is keeping the conversation alive, keeping the conversation in the conscious part of your brain, not letting it slip to your unconscious part of your brain, where you were really incensed about something a few months ago, or somebody you knew was discriminated against, or where there was a problem. But actually, do you know what? You've sort of moved on from that. You've got other concerns in your life, and maybe it's about how you homeschool your kids or whatever else it may be. But that keeping the conversation alive is so important. And I talk to Richard Siddle about this all the time, and I have to say he's done a great job of actually pushing lots of D&I content out through the buyer. But the more people talk about it, the more comfortable people become about discussing it. So if I think back, where we are now compared to where we were when Black Lives Matters happened last year, just how much more comfortable yourselves are you about talking about diversity and inclusion, or about colour or race or ethnicity or disability than perhaps you were 7 months ago? So pushing it out there and keeping that conversation alive is really, really important. One of the other things I would love to see more of, and this comes back to the collaboration piece, is when somebody's done something that's great, or when somebody's put their hand up and said, do you know what? This has happened to me, but I want to move forward and I want to try and make things change, or actually I've just, I've had this, there's been this great success, or I've seen this brilliant collaboration of people happening. Please share it with each other. Please push it out there. Please retweet things through your social media, because again, it just pushes more coverage. And you know, I've been asked, how do we help move people who are blinded to it? Well, do you know, when things get talked about often enough, eventually you get people on board. And I think that's pretty much it. So my summary is share, collaborate, talk about it, keep it alive. And I guess my final thing, and this is more around how people go about doing things. If you keep doing the same things, you're going to get the same outcomes. So when you're looking at D&I, or when you're looking at writing something, or whether you're looking at hiring somebody, if you keep going down the same path, nothing will change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kirsten. Quite enlightening and very informative, lots of suggestions. And I think big and small ways, all of us, each of us can contribute in bringing us all together. So any questions if you have, oh wow, we've got lots of written information here. Yes, loads of female winemakers and CEOs as well. Fantastic. Meg, you had a question. Would you like to unmute and ask your question for Kirsten?
Yeah, thank you, Sumi. Kirsten, thank you so much. This was really terrific talk, and I'm American, so I'm really interested to hear a different perspective that's going on in the UK. It's very enlightening. I wondered if the on-premise aspect of the wine industry in the UK is more diverse. The restaurant industry sometimes can tend to be more diverse, and I wonder what your perspective on that is for sommelier, wine buyers, servers, etc.
Yeah, the Somme community is definitely much more diverse. There are a lot. There are people from there are more, but there's better BAME representation within the Somme community. But actually, there's huge representation of people from all different walks of life throughout Europe. So I would say that's actually a very non-homogenous group of people, but sometimes unheard voices.
Thank you. So just to follow on, do you think that they serve as good ambassadors for wine for consumers? In terms of the diversity within the framework of that diversity question?
Yes, I think they do. So if you come back to my point about why would I join something if people don't look like me? I'll give you just give you a small example from last year. So there was a company that had a wine club, and all the people in the wine club picture were all white. Now, how attractive is that to somebody if you're not white? So I think, yes, absolutely. The broader the reach and the different faces and the different experiences and the different learnings are definitely attractive. It makes it more attractive for a broader audience of people.
Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. Any other question? Keith, did you want to ask about the PR, or was it a question?
Kirsten, PR is really crucial to wine companies, large or small, be they Diageo's or the two-man band. Incredibly, in the UK, principals employees of wine PR companies in the region of 90% women, maybe more in fact. I did a quick check before this meeting. Generic organisations are also female heavy. I know a young white male, in fact he does some mostly unpaid desk research for me, who after school, in fact, did 2 weeks work experience in a PR company, and he was absolutely horrified at the sexism he experienced from the women. It didn't help that he might be described as working class, and they were pretty bluntly taking the piss out of his accent and about the way he dressed, etc. So I think that perhaps PR is the place to start. And of course, looking at the wine industry generally, I think working class people are very underrepresented, especially the higher up you go in levels.
I agree, and I think that's a really valid point. So if I just flip back to the corporate world, so I have a massive issue with human resources functions that are 90% women and 10% men, because if you come back to my original point about groupthink, how do you bring diversity of thought in if actually you have a whole bunch of people that are the same? So I'm absolutely completely with you, and I think you're probably quite right on the accent. I mean, that's just an example of completely non-inclusive behaviour. And actually, I hadn't thought about the PRs, but maybe that's a good place for me to go, as I do contact quite a lot of people and I do call them out. And I'm not calling them out in a bad way, but I'm just saying, look, I see you doing this, but have you thought about doing A, B, and C to help improve that? So that sounds like a great group of people for me to approach moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, we have Louis Chester. Fran, you wanted to introduce him, who is starting off the foundation charity.
Yeah, Lewis, the floor is yours. Tell everybody a little bit about what you've been working on with your nation state in 6 months.
Sure. Hi, everybody. So as you might have seen, a new charity was formed called the Gerards Wine Education Charitable Foundation, which has 5 trustees, myself, Nina, Romane, Gerard's son, Jancis Robinson, and Ian Harris from the WSET. And an event, a big event is planned for October in collaboration with my company, which was also Gerard was a founder of, called Liquid Icons, that we produced the Gerard Basset Global Fine Wine Report, and Annabelle's, the Verley Clubs, where we'll be putting on the Oscars of fine wine called the Golden Vines. And money from that event through a fine wine and experience auction, which we hope to raise £1 million, for diversity-related causes. And in particular, we have 2 headline scholarships where we're working with the Institute of Masters of Wine and the Court of Master Sommeliers European chapter. They're going to be called the Golden Vines Diversity Scholarships, and they're going to be worth £55,000 each for each scholar. The judging panel will be Jancis, Clément Robert, Master Sommelier, Rajat Pal from the States, Colton McCoy, who's one of the 3 only Black Master Sommelier, and Nina. And the scholarships will be aimed at BIPOC students and will cover all of their costs of the Master of Wine and the Master Sommelier, and a 12-month internship program at some of the best fine wine estates in the Northern and Southern Hemisphere. And our judges will also be mentors to our scholars as they go forward in their studies and in their careers. Given we're going to raise hopefully £1 million, the aim is to also fund lots of other diversity-related wine education programs, both through institutional partners, such as University of California, Davis Oenology and Viticulture, the Kedge Business School, the University of Reims, and the Burgundy Business and Wine School, and the Adelaide University, WSET, and then community groups such as the Hughes Society, the Roots Fund with an OIV scholarship. And we're aiming to do programs that are not just scholarships, but are also recruitment type programs. So the program with UC Davis will be about funding professors to go down to Southern California and recruit 18-year-olds from Black high schools to tell them about the wine industry, and then to bring them for a summer program to UC Davis. And we're going to do something similar with the Kedge Business School as well, but more in the sommelier industry. You talked about the power of the pen. We are going to do a live Zoom press conference for the Global Wine Press to launch the Golden Vines and these and the charity and the diversity scholarships on the 2nd of March at 4:30 p.m. And myself, Nina, Richard Caring from Annabelle's, Adrian Garforth, MW from the Institute, and Ronan Sayburn from the court will be introducing these new programs.
Fantastic. Great making use of education as a way to build up diversity as well. We wish you good luck for that, Louis, and looking forward to hearing more updates on that.
No problem.
So sorry, was this question meant for me? How does it feel when visiting European wine areas, Wink? Or was it for?
Yeah, I'm throwing this question to you, Sumi, as a BAME person, that when you visit France especially, but probably other European countries as well, and especially when you first came into the wine industry, and you discover that there are no Black wine producers, there are no French, Asian wine producers, they don't have any Black, Asian employees most of the time. Even at harvest perhaps is the only time you might see a handful. How does that feel?
Very lonely, and thank you for asking me this question. Yes, it feels very lonely, to be honest. I'm not I don't speak any European languages, although having lived here, I've started understanding we all need to acclimatize and adopt and adapt as well. But yeah, it feels I feel a bit excluded, to be very honest, when I'm there, because there is a network of people already known. And for me to come and ask questions in English when the whole conversation is happening in a native language, it seems that, hey, who's this outsider here? Well, yes, there have been numerous examples. I can't even name them in terms of how I feel, even when I first joined my first tasting here, to see an already very thriving network that I could not break into, and I had no connections either. It does need a person with a lot of resilience who is not colored to kind of really make their way probably double or triple times more, because it's very easy to feel frustrated. And I'm glad that this is a forum where it's all coming out, because I think mental health is very, very important for all of us. And no one should feel that their worth is not appreciated. And that's the whole point. Diversity includes a lot more than, you know, just color, race, and religion and faith. It involves how you feel from inside. And to be honest, even in Zoom forums, very difficult to understand what you are going through from within. And in a way, the Wine Bitch event brought it all out in the forefront. But I'm pretty sure that this has been entrenched. It's been going on for quite some time in the industry, because, you know, I've come from a country which is now making wine, but it never did. And there's so much push now going on into Asian wineries. And it felt very nice when I went to Thailand and when I was doing my round in India to say, hey, you know, I've now come from a country where there is talk of wine, but it's definitely something that you need to keep screaming and shouting. And as Kirsten said, you know, you need to talk about it, you need to bring it out. And I realized whatever I did was never enough, whether it was WSD level 1, 2, 3, to the extent today I'm doing my Master of Wine. Don't know whether I'll be able to do it, but yes, I don't have that depth of involvement. And I have always felt the need, being compelled to feel that I have to do more. I got to do more. I have to do more. And I think that's what it kind of brings to either a breakdown point, or it can help you motivate. But either ways, you know, there's a lot of balance that is needed to work. And I think addressing this is very, very key, not just for balancing the color or, you know, age, gender, but also for balancing mental health, which I think at this point of time, none of us, thanks to COVID, are having extreme good, happy mental health. And probably this is also another thing which Kirsten says we should keep talking about. It could be, why are you feeling upset? Is it because of this issue or anything else? And diversity kind of covers all of these topics. And Kirsten, please correct me if I'm wrong. I think this is a very important part, right, of D&I.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right, Sumi. It's about you know, asking people how they feel. The mental health piece is enormous around diversity and inclusion. If you have an inclusive environment, people are more likely to say, do you know what, today I'm struggling. Today my mental health is not very good. If you don't have an inclusive, and actually therefore, as an employer and an employee, how wonderful is that? Because, you know, that person feels that they can be comfortable, and they'll probably be very loyal to you as an employer. If it's a non-inclusive environment, people just won't talk about it. And actually, you know, they vote with their feet. And that was really my point about hiring people from underrepresented areas into organizations where it isn't inclusive. And I think, you know, Keith, your point was spot on. It isn't inclusive, and suddenly people just leave. And those individuals don't tell you why, they just go.
Exactly. And so it has happened, because I was working in the banking sector before, and it's just, if you don't see the happiness, and if you don't feel that you're being involved, I think that's the whole point. Diversity and inclusion must bring out a person's self-worth. And that is the most important thing at this point of time, that no one should feel that they're being ridiculed or sidelined, either intentionally or by ignorance. I think both are equally wrong. And so if you're ignorant, sorry, you need to be up to date. We have the best of technology times round. If you're doing it intentionally, you should be jailed. And I think a level of fear factor needs to be installed, because otherwise people who think they can do anything. And I may be wrong in saying it, but if you don't impose certain things as a framework or a guideline, human tendency is, as you said, it's very easy to be just comfy and just doing what you've been doing for ages. Some people, you know, all of us need to be pulled out of our comfort zones at some point of time, and maybe this is the call for that. Yep, no intention and no ignorance. None of them are good reasons to escape from this. And this is going to be a phenomenon. This is not something which is something, I say it's a global phenomenon. It's amongst the younger people, millennials, it's a very normal thing, because, you know, I know of Swedish Indian families, I know of Italian Indian families, and for them, you know, husband speaks in Italian, wife speaks in Bengali. It's normal. And for many families, I have known gay families, it's normal. And I think the more we make things normalized, the less people feel intimidated and excluded. And I think this is the whole call of diversity and inclusion, to just, you know, get everyone into a balanced zone.
I agree, Sumi. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? We're kind of running out of time.
This is a huge topic, and, you know, we could talk about this for hours and hours and hours.
Sure.
It's just so complicated, and that really was why, after the Drinks Trust discussion last Thursday, so many people walked away feeling overwhelmed by it, because I think the enormity of it suddenly was in the forefront of everyone's minds.
Absolutely.
But it's about, but don't, you know, don't try not to let it overwhelm you. Everybody has a role to play. Everybody, step by step, day by day. Don't let the haters get you. Just keep on going. Keep on supporting people. Keep on asking people how they are. Keep on sharing. Keep pushing the message out there, because, you know, you don't underestimate. And I know as one person you may feel you can't influence things, but please don't underestimate the power of the individual.
Fantastic. This is a great takeaway, and yes, small and baby steps. I think we do need to take whatever we can, think about it, work out, contribute, and I think Drinks Trust is taking the lead for this. But thank you so much. I think whatever we can contribute, we should be able to help bring it out in small and big ways. So thank you all for your participation. If you have any questions, please feel free to send it to our administrator, Andrea. She can forward it to Kirsten, or you can contact Kirsten directly. But thank you once again for your time.